If you sit back and look at the collection of arms the New York Mets could put together on a playoff roster, you realize this is a team that is built for October. The problem, you got to get there first.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I cover the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. Want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Now, another frustrating loss for the New York Mets as the lineup continues to struggle, and that was really the story of this game. They only got 4 hits. Logan Allen, who's a good left-handed starter and pitching better than his ERA, which is over 4, but if you look at his last 7 starts, he's got an ERA of 3.67, so he has been pitching a little bit better as of late. His last time out, he went 7 innings, allowed just 2 runs. So I don't want to say this is the guy the Mets absolutely should have crushed, but this lineup just can't get it together. And the thing that's so frustrating is early on, it seemed like they were going to have a good day. First inning, Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto each draw walks. Pete Alonso hits a sacrifice fly. He got 1 run on the table. They left one in scoring position as Brandon Nimmo struck out with 2 outs to end that inning. But in the second inning, Mark Vientos hits a leadoff double. Jeff McNeil drops a bunt to advance him to third. Francisco Alvarez draws a walk. Then Tyrone Taylor, who everybody was frustrated that he was in the starting lineup. People were wondering, well, Cedric Mullins has these great splits this year. He's better against lefties than righties this year for some reason. So why is Cedric Mullins getting protected from facing left-handed pitching? Well, it ended up working out for the Mets early as Tyrone Taylor gets the only hit the Mets had in this game with a runner in scoring position, giving the Mets their second run of the game. After that, you have Starling Marte who reaches on an error. So they had the bases loaded, 1 out, Francisco Lindor up. And Lindor rips one up the middle, well over 100 miles per hour off the bat. That goes to an exit velocity of 105. It hits the pitcher's foot on the way to Brian Rocchio, who's able to make a backhanded play, make the flip to the shortstop Arias, and they turn 2. If Lindor beats it out, that's another run. The Mets lose this game by 1 run. It's a game of inches at times. If that ball doesn't clip the pitcher, maybe it shoots right through the middle. And Lindor does get that base hit, and the New York Mets score 2 runs there, and that might be the difference in winning the game. But instead, it's a double play ball that ends the inning, and then that was it. The lineup just shriveled up after that, completely went quiet. The Mets, they had a base runner apiece in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th innings. Juan Soto walked with 1 out in the 5th inning, and then the next 14 batters were retired consecutively. The Guardians' bullpen pitched 4 perfect innings, and the New York Mets just went out quietly in the night, basically, as they just could not hit. Now, the other side of it, though, is you watched, again, what this bullpen can do. Granted, Tyler Rogers did not have the best outing, but you saw a new blueprint that could work for the Mets, where Clay Holmes could stay in the starting rotation. He goes 5 innings on 75 pitches, allowed 3 hits, 1 walk, 2 runs, struck out 6. And the first time through the lineup, Clay Holmes was dominant. He retired the side in order in each inning. He struck out 4. So a perfect first turn through the order. Then the second time through, in the 4th inning, he ran into some trouble, issued a leadoff single to Steven Kwan, who just sort of stuck his bat out and was able to get a base hit. Then he walks a batter to put 2 runners on for Jose Ramirez, who ends up hitting a ground ball to Pete Alonso that wasn't hit hard enough to turn 2. Also, Pete was a little bit slow to second base, and J-Ram runs a little bit too well anyway, so he beats it out. You get a pop fly single that scores 1 run for the Guardians. They get another soft ground out that at that point advances Jose Ramirez to third base. And then Arias, who continues to kill the Mets, ends up ripping a base hit into right field and ties up the game. Now, Clay Holmes settled down after that. In the 5th inning, it was a 1-2-3 frame, picked up his 6th strikeout of the day. So if Clay Holmes from this point on can do what he did in this game, go 5 innings and give up just 2 runs, well, then you turn it over to this bullpen and you should be fine on most days. Now, in this game, Gregory Soto pitched a scoreless 6th, Brooks Raley a scoreless 8th, Ryan Helsley a dominant 9th with a couple of strikeouts. But in that 7th inning, it was Tyler Rogers' turn, and unfortunately, he gave up 3 straight hits with 2 outs, and that allows the winning run to come around to score. But if you're looking at this team moving forward and you're looking at that starting rotation, again, this was an outing that gave you some optimism that Clay Holmes could stick in the rotation because you don't need him to go 6. You just need him to get through 5, giving up 2 earned runs or less, something he's done a lot of lately, even with the fatigue. And if he does that, he might be fine. But also there might be a different level that he can get to or that this team can get to by refining his role. Because if you can bottle up those first 3 innings and you shorten them up and say, hey, get me 3, you have 45 to 50 pitches to get through 3 innings or at least get as many outs as you can. All of a sudden, you might see a more dominant version of Clay Holmes, sort of a hybrid of what he was as a relief pitcher and what he's now been conditioned to do as a starting pitcher. And when you put that into the equation, when you factor in the bullpen the Mets have, a couple of the starting pitchers that still could be really, really dominant by the end of this season if they can get themselves right. And I'm looking at Kodai Senga and Sean Manaea. Then all of a sudden you realize that this is a Mets team that might actually be built for October. I want to explain how they are built for October, what the best 13 looks like for the Mets when it comes to their pitching staff, and why this lineup just has to figure it out because the pitching might be even better than we're giving it credit for during this frustrating period where they're still trying to figure out that back end of the rotation. Maybe there's some creative ways they can work around it. I want to talk about all that here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Day Hue, and so is this hat that I'm wearing. For a Mets fan like me, this one hits the mark. Game Day Hue makes clean, no logo gear with team-inspired colorways for every pro and college fan base. It's all about letting your colors speak for you. No giant logos, just smart, versatile style that works on game day, on the course, or anywhere in between. The hat pairs perfectly with my usual gear. It doesn't replace my team's logo stuff. It just adds to my lineup. If you're a Knicks fan and a Mets fan, one hat, 2 teams, it works with everything you got. And it's not just hats. Check out their split shade gloves made for the golf course. The perfect gift for the fan that has everything right now. You can get 15% off with the code MLB15 at GameDayHue.com. That's GameDayHue. HUE.com. The code even stacks on bundle deals, so now's that time to load up. Let your colors talk because colors speak louder than words. That's GameDayHue.com, code MLB15. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. I love to get there by the end of the regular season, so I appreciate all of you. Continue to subscribe. And also make sure you hit that notification bell so you're catching all of our content, especially our live shows. Chris Schubert does a great job at the Locked On Postcast going live at the end of every game. And today with the day game, I will be the one doing the postcast or the post-game show. So make sure you're subscribed and you catch me live once the Mets game is over this afternoon. Now, Clay Holmes has my mind in a pretzel right now because I watched this start, and this was something that I was looking for going into the start to see, all right, is there a wall that Clay Holmes has hit, but can he fight his way through it? Does he look better than he did the last time out, which at that point, I just thought, yeah, he shouldn't be a starting pitcher anymore. He's too fatigued. This time, he comes out firing and looks outstanding for 3 innings, has a rough frame, but then settled back in, got to 75 pitches and looked good. So I watched the start and I said, well, I was talking about it going in. If you look at what Clay Holmes had done recently, while he said he hit that wall and felt fatigued in Colorado, and since then he hasn't pitched into the 6th inning yet, or hasn't completed 6 innings, he still has been a relatively effective 5 and dive pitcher. And now with this start added in, you have 7 of his last 11 starts where Clay Holmes has gone 5 innings, has allowed 2 earned runs or less. It's not too bad. In these other starts, for the most part, he hasn't been giving up a ton of runs. It's just sometimes he goes a little bit shorter than 5, or sometimes he might give up 3 or 4 runs. But there hasn't been very many starts where Clay Holmes just lost you a game. And so after watching his start, I was like, man, well, maybe he can stick in this rotation for a little bit. And then come October, you eventually do shorten him up because what we just saw is Clay Holmes facing a lineup one time through can be really special, especially in a playoff setting. But then you hear Clay Holmes after the game, and that's where I said my mind's been twisted to a pretzel because he was asked about the workload, and he said, you have to be mindful, even though his body's feeling good, you have to be mindful about tripling your innings in one season. A guy that's used to throwing 60 to 70 innings, now you probably don't want to broach 180. But if he stays in the rotation all season, he might get there. He's over 120 right now, 122 and a third. So what do the Mets do? I was ready to say, after watching him pitch, keep him in the rotation for the rest of the month and then bring the kids up at some point to fill in. Whether that is taking starts or whether that is, tandem pitching guys, having Holmes and McLean go together, which we've been talking about for a little bit now because they are pitching on the same day. Nolan McLean pitched tonight, pitched a really good game for Syracuse. So that's an option for the Mets. But let's throw all of that aside for now because we've been trying to have the conversation of what do the Mets do with this rotation and how do they figure out the back end. And it's still something that has to be solved, but let's focus on October, assuming the Mets can get there, which is what we're going to talk about in the next segment. But let's imagine the best version of the New York Mets. 13 arms of your choosing from this roster. There's 3 guys that are going to make playoff starts. It's David Peterson, Kodai Senga, and Sean Manaea. That's your ideal at this point. I don't even think you care about the 4-starter right now. It's about hoping that Peterson can keep this up and that Senga can return to what he was doing earlier this season, and Sean Manaea can continue to get built up. And what we saw for 5 innings, he can maybe do that over 7 innings from his last start. And if that all comes together, that is a 1-2-3 that you like in the playoffs. All right, so you start there. Who's going to be the 4-starter? Maybe you don't need one. Maybe instead you have these bulk relief arms. You take the other 2 spots that typically go to your 5-man rotation. You fill those. Let's even say it's still Clay Holmes. So Clay Holmes, and maybe it's Huascar Braziban comes back up. Now 2 more spots. 2 spots for your typical bullpen. Maybe you do bring up Nolan McLean and Brandon Sproat. And then you have your 6 leverage guys that you've built from trading for 3 at the deadline and the 3 you had in-house with Edwin Diaz, Reed Garrett, and Brooks Raley. Now you added to it with Soto, Tyler Rogers, and Ryan Helsley. So you have 6 leverage guys, 3 starting pitchers, and 4 bulk relief arms. That right there is a really good pitching staff in October. You have a lot of different ways you can go about it. For a bullpen game, you can throw Clay Holmes out there to start, have him get through one turn of the lineup. Then if you're facing the top of the lineup coming up, maybe you go out there and that's a point where you throw Reed Garrett out there in the 3rd or the 4th inning against the top of the lineup. He gets through that. He gets in the middle innings. Maybe you do give a Nolan McLean a shot and you have him pitch to the bottom half of the lineup. Maybe he gets you 2. And when it comes back around to the top, maybe now you're throwing one of those high leverage relievers back in there. And who knows how you actually get through it all. But the point is, you don't need 4 starting pitchers come October. You need 3, and you need to have enough arms behind them to have some bulk options to get the job done. And I think Clay Holmes will be in that role come October. I think you might buy some more time here and let Holmes make 2 or 3 more turns in the rotation. But eventually, the more I think about it, and then when I hear him talk after the game and talk about being mindful about his innings jump, it doesn't seem like a guy that is entirely comfortable just throwing caution to the wind and being a starting pitcher throughout the rest of the season and into October. I think he might even be ready to be shortened up. It's just a matter of when do you make that move. Now, Nolan McLean pitched today and looked great. 5 2/3, allowed just 1 hit, walked 3, struck out 7, did not give up a run. Got up to 96 pitches. Now he has appeared in 15 games in AAA, 12 starts, and then 3 games where he piggybacked a rehabbing pitcher. He has a 2.81 ERA and 83 and third innings pitched. Nolan McLean has proven that he is ready for the next challenge. So maybe that comes next week. Maybe that comes 2 weeks from now. Maybe it comes in September as a call-up. We still don't know. You also have Oscar Braziban, who pitched in this game in Syracuse as well. Got the final out of the sixth. He put up a scoreless seventh and allowed 2 hits in the eighth inning, got an out, was pulled, and then Richard Lovelady finished off that inning. So Braziban, 2 appearances now in Syracuse. Both of them has gotten 5 outs without giving up a run. And then you have Brandon Sproat is likely going to pitch today. He has allowed just 2 runs over his last 6 starts, had a 0.67 ERA in the month of July. Those are 3 arms in Syracuse right now that I think will help the Mets at some point down the stretch. And really the question is, what do you do with some of these arms that are on the outside looking in when I stack up what I think are going to be the 13 best pitchers on this Mets roster come October? And the outside looking in guys, you got Frankie Montas, you got Tyler McGill, who we'll see if and when he comes off the IL. At this point, I'd imagine September. And then you got Paul Blackburn, who we still have no idea what the Mets do with. And then you have Ryan Stanek, who honestly at some point you probably just have to cut to be able to bring up one of the kids. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Mets can navigate it. But again, when you talk about what they could do in October, to be able to have a bullpen where you have 6 leverage arms that you like, where you have really high upside bulk guys with great stuff in Holmes, McLean, Sproat, maybe McGill, maybe Braziban, maybe Montas. You can definitely piece this thing together on a pitching front, even without the 4 bona fide starting pitchers that you're very happy to hand the ball to. The Phillies have something a lot more like that, right? Where they have playoff starters they can trust. That does not mean that they're absolutely the better team come October, because if the Mets have the deeper bullpen and they have 6 arms they can trust, and if you throw Clay Holmes into that mix, 7 arms they can trust, and some exciting top prospects who can eat up some innings, can give you 2 or 3 innings in a playoff game, whether you're behind and you're doing the thing that Dave Roberts had to do last year, where you're just sort of trying to survive and get to the next day and you're punting a playoff game, or if you're getting creative in a bullpen game and trying to navigate your way through it. But the Mets really do have a better 13 than I think people give them credit for because of what could come up from that farm system. But the problem right now is the lineup, getting enough consistent run support for the pitching staff, and then just getting there. Because this is a team that, again, if you look at this bullpen and what they can put together, they are built for October, but you have to get to October. And lately, this has been a pretty rough stretch for your New York Mets. I'm going to talk about that more here to close out the show in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. When I was using Monarch, I was shocked by how much money I was wasting on those unwanted subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for. But month after month, they were hitting the account. So now I know to be mindful of those subscriptions. And also, I know that takeout stacks up as well. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure to become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. You can get the lamp graphics sent to your phone each day, so knows in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so where are the Mets at in the race right now? The Phillies, they keep on winning, so now all of a sudden the Mets are 2.5 games back of Philly, and they are a half a game up on the Padres, right on their heels. They're 3 games up on the Reds. And the Reds currently have the tiebreaker over the Mets. So I look at the Reds, I look at the Giants, these other teams are on the outside looking in. When you have the Diamondbacks who sold, the Cardinals who sold, it does feel like the playoff field is relatively locked in with the Dodgers and Cubs from the Central, the Padres or not Dodgers and Cubs from the Central, the Cubs and the Brewers from the Central, the Dodgers and Padres from the West, and the Mets and the Phillies from the East. It really feels like that's going to be the playoff field. But we've seen crazier things happen. The Mets have to snap out of this. Luckily, they have the right guy on the mound to do it today with David Peterson. But you have this one more game against the Guardians. You then have a day off. You have 3 games in Milwaukee against the Brewers, who are the best team in baseball right now. An off day on Monday. And then you begin a stretch. 12 games, 4 series that could be way more difficult than they would suggest if you're looking at a strength of schedule. If you look at a strength of schedule, they'd say, oh, this next stretch might be the easiest for the Mets down throughout the final couple months of the season. This might be as good as it gets because you got a couple of series against some sub 500 teams. But 2 of those series are against the Braves. So here's the stretch the Mets will go through after this week. They have the Braves come to town, then the Mariners come to town. They then hit the road to face the Nationals, and then they go to Atlanta to face the Braves. And you know the Braves are going to relish the role of spoiler. Then if that's not hard enough, you got the Phillies after that all. So 15 games that could very well decide your season, honestly. Before that, you have 4 to get some momentum. So the Mets got to do what they can to beat the Guardians into this game and avoid getting swept. They got to find a way to win 2 games in Milwaukee, which is going to be easier said than done. And then you try to handle business against teams that you are better than. I think the Mets are better than the Braves. They're better than the Nationals. Mariners, I don't know. It's a little bit tougher to gauge, but theoretically on paper, I would say the Mets are. You got to start playing better baseball. And I talked about it a lot on yesterday's show. Under the guise of finding the magic, but really it was about finding momentum. This is a Mets team that in July won, well, what did we say on the show yesterday? 5 of their first 7 series. They started last month 14-7. And they got swept by the Padres. And then we've seen what's happened since in the month of August. But we're not that far removed from a 21-game stretch where the Mets were 14-7 and won 5 of 7 series. That was 2 weeks ago. Not even really. Right? That was that was last week, really. Jeez. Literally. I guess 10 days ago, because the series going into the deadline was when they got swept by the Padres. So 10 days ago, the Mets were coming off a stretch where they were 14-7 in 21 games. Winning 2 out of every 3, which is what they got to do down the stretch. The Mets win 2 out of every 3 games, they will be fine. A lot easier said than done, though. More likely, you got to shoot for something a little more realistic, like 6 out of every 10. But the Mets obviously had the ability to do that. This is still a talented team. This is still a talented lineup. They got to figure out the bats, though. They got to hit. And I don't know what the sweet spot is with this lineup. Does it make sense to keep just rotating guys in and out? Who deserves to keep playing more every day? Does Mark Vientos deserve everyday reps with the at-bats that he's taken lately? How much do you feed Beatty playing time or lean into the upside of Ronnie Mauricio? There's a lot of questions with those guys. But really, the answers for this lineup still fall on the top of the lineup. Juan Soto was amazing, and now he is back to some struggles like we saw earlier this season. When's he going to snap out of it? Because part of what you pay the ridiculous $765 million for is you pay for a guy that's not going to slump as much, that's going to be able to snap out of those slumps. So he's got to step up. Lindor's got to step up. Alonso, Nimmo. Those are still the guys that drive this team no matter what. But again, if you can get there, if you can get into the playoffs, even as a wild card team, the ability to go to that bullpen for as many as 6 or 7 innings of a playoff game with a bevy of high leverage relievers, it just can open up everything from you once you get into the setting of shorter series and not having to navigate months and months, or excuse me, more like weeks and weeks now at this point of a schedule to get to that finish line. I'm curious how the Mets are going to fare throughout the rest of this week. And I'm very curious what they're going to do with their pitching staff moving forward, which is something we will be talking about on one of these upcoming shows, because I still don't know. And I hope we get a plan, but I still don't know what the thought is on Montas. Is he out of the rotation? Does he get an opener? Is that opener in Paul Blackburn? How are the Mets going to put all of that together is still beyond me. But they have a good bullpen. They have the makings of a good lineup. And if those two things come together and the starting pitching is just not atrocious, the Mets can win a lot of baseball games and they can make some noise come October. They really can. Right now, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like everything is just miserable and this team is garbage again and what's happening and everyone's getting frustrated. I get it. It's not fun to watch. But it's also not that far away from a team that is right in this race, because as Brandon Nimmo said after the game, sometimes it's a matter of just one hit that doesn't go your way. And if a couple hits do go their way over the last 2 nights, they've won these games. They are, half a game back of the Phillies instead, or a game and a half back of the Phillies instead. And there's not as much negative talk about the team because we watch some victories and we see them hopefully getting themselves ready for that really big playoff push. Instead, though, you watch some frustrating losses and you question if this team's ever going to figure it out on the hitting side, and how can they possibly cover up the holes of that rotation. So that's where we're at with your New York Mets. I'm going to do a live stream after the game, as I mentioned today, so make sure you check that out. And then moving forward tomorrow, we will continue to talk about this team and how they can get better and how they potentially use some of the top prospects. I also this week am planning to do a look ahead to 2026, because while I don't want to get too far out in front here, and I don't want to lose sight of the season we're getting to enjoy at this very moment, when you look at this farm system and look ahead, the best might really be yet to come for the New York Mets beyond 2025. Anyway, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. I appreciate all of you for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can follow me on social media at Finkelstein Ryan. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, check out Locked On MLB Game Night with insight from our local experts, as well as league-wide experts that take you through all the action of Major League Baseball from the night before. Make sure you check out Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel, as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.